Hey everyone, welcome to another Speed Seekers podcast. Today's guest is Adam Spence. Adam's professional title is Product Architect Leader, Area 51 at Garmin. You know, Garmin, the GPS watch, avionics, another cool device company. But Adam's non-professional title is Racer. I think that's your title, isn't it, Adam?
I would love that to be my title.
Yeah. Which one do you prefer? Your Garmin title, your professional title, or Racer?
I think definitely the Racer. You know, the way I see it is I'm not sponsored to race, but at least I get paid by Garmin that facilitates that. So I think that's really what, I'm drawn towards.
Right. Actually, that's an interesting thing. I mean, your background, you have an engineering degree and you've been working for Garmin for a bunch of years, and we'll kind of get into that. But you've got a motorsport background. You've been involved with motorsport for a long time. Talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. So it started out when I was very young. I kind of got an interest in motorcycles from a very young age, probably 5 years old at a local Butlins, which is like a holiday sort of camp. From there, though, really into my teenage years, that developed into an interest in cars. And then from there, it was into motorsports until I finally picked up my first kart, which was a Rotax Senior 125 kart in England, probably around the age of 20 or so, by the time I could afford one. And then I was forever going out to local racetracks, practicing, and just kind of really stemmed from there.
And obviously this conversation, well, maybe not obvious, but for listeners who have not heard, Garmin has launched a new product called the Catalyst, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But how did you get from the UK to you're now in Kansas, and you're working for Garmin? How did that transition? How did that happen? I'm curious.
That's a really interesting one. I get that question a lot, and I would love to say it was motorsports driven, but in all reality, we have a real life too, and so that's really where that comes from. So the story really started out that from a very early age, I knew I always wanted to come and live and work in the States. I had a lot of respect for everything that happens here in America, and it was something that I was always interested in. I remember at high school telling a teacher that I was going to do that, and I think they were very surprised. So really it came down to the first opportunity I got to come and live and work out here, I took because I really wanted to experience that. And at the time that was for a competitor of Garmin. And so I kind of moved across, worked in a satellite office there and really enjoyed the experience. That experience came to an end. And during the transition back to the UK is when I first came into contact with Garmin. And from there, a couple of years later, I came to live and work out in Kansas, of all places.
Yeah. Well, Kansas is very much like England, isn't it?
It has been this year with the rain, but it's so surprisingly, Kansas is a great place to live, especially with a family. And I think my wife thought we were mad for doing it. And she'd never been to America or even Kansas when she first came out here. But sure enough, in the middle of January in a snowstorm, I bring the wife and kids out to their new house in Kansas, and life has kind of gone from there.
Yeah, that's cool. So I think you and I started talking. I was actually looking at some notes a while ago. It's been about 3 years or so, I think. Maybe a bit more than that, but about 3 years ago, I think it was. And I remember the first time that we connected and you said that you work for Area 51 at Garmin. I was like, whoa, that's cool, but what the heck is Area 51? Can you talk about that, or is that all top secret?
I can talk about it. It is a great name, and I think it describes very well kind of what we do here or what we're focused on. But really the group, Area 51 or A51 as we call it, sometimes internally, really that's focused around the diversification, for Garmin. What that means is, Garmin is over 30 years old now, and we were founded in marine and aviation. But from there, people have known us from a range of different products, from the outdoor world to the fitness world, to, in the automotive world. So it really comes down to people's passions. And what I mean by that is all that diversification and growth came from people's interests where we were working on technology and we saw that it had an application and could serve a new customer in a new way. And we kind of went from there. So Area 51 has kind of been set up to really now become intentional when it comes to that diversification. So all the projects we work on generally have a very key problem in mind, which we are laser focused on solving. And we try to do in a way that really enriches the lives of the customer.
Well, I remember coming to your office, I can't remember when that, again, a couple of years ago, whatever, and sitting down and talking about it was almost like you were like poking at me going kind of like, what is your dream wish, your wish list for the ultimate in a data tool, something to help drivers? And I remember us kind of going through a bunch of different things. And now when I look at the Catalyst, I go, hey, a bunch of those things, well, pretty much everything that I asked for is there, actually, plus some things that I never even would have imagined at that time. So let's talk about the Catalyst. And I don't know, well, I can guess, and I think I know, but since it was launched a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I guess it was, I have been absolutely swamped with emails, social media posts, questions, asking me thoughts on it and my input and my insights and stuff like that. I got to imagine you've been even more swamped than me. So maybe we can talk a bit about I guess the evolution of the Garmin Catalyst and kind of where it came from, and maybe even what was the motivation behind it?
That's a really good question. So where this stemmed from was, as I mentioned earlier, Garmin is always encouraging associates to follow their passion, because generally it's in someone's passion that we end up finding a problem in an industry that we can help solve. And like I say, enrich the lives of our customers. So for me, that really is motorsports. You mentioned I've been interested in that for a long time. And so motorsports is really something I wanted to try and find an avenue for Garmin. So within Garmin, in terms of the technology and capabilities that we have, we've got so much that we can offer. It's just a case of finding out what it is we should do. And we often talk about what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because fundamentally, you can take cool technology and apply it to any sort of problem. But unless it's an actual problem that a customer has a need for, it really won't be successful. And so it kind of stems from that point where I had to look internally at myself and say, okay, what is it that I'm doing when I go out on the weekend? Or what is it that I'm doing in terms of my racing and my driving or where I want to get to that I need help with? And that's really where it started. So you mentioned about when we first started talking, and I think if I remember correctly, one of the first conversations we had was me asking you about virtual reality and whether or not that had any application in improving as a driver. And so kind of the story or the background in that was, at the time, during the off season, especially in Kansas, where we get quite cold and snowy, I was looking for ways to improve my driving, and I wanted to do it where I couldn't get to the track. And so I started using virtual reality a lot, and I found that really, really helped. But during that, again, even there, I was finding problems with, whilst it's great for the muscle memory and everything we do, there is definitely things where I need to come up to speed more quickly when I go to a track, or understand as I do these practice laps or in a race of the areas that I could improve. And so that's really the kind of foundation that I started looking at what I was doing myself and going, okay, where are the areas? Where is the focus? What do I just need instant answers for? Which was kind of the birthplace for Catalyst. And so hopefully, as we kind of describe that, you'll understand what that means. But really, it came from key problems, critical problems that myself and others were experiencing, and really wanting to be able to solve them.
Well, and the interesting thing about simulators, and I'm a huge fan of the use of simulators for helping somebody to develop their driving. But the problem is that you can practice the wrong things.
Absolutely. And so what was fundamental with that for me was I was sat there, I used to do it. It was probably for 30 minutes to an hour a day at 5 a.m. in the morning. But I'd be down on the simulator, and every day I set myself a goal to either improve on a particular track or a particular time, to improve in a time trial, to work towards, just basically getting better. But I could see a progression throughout the week. So if I chose, for example, a particular track such as Kota and actually practice that throughout a week, I could see the progression from hitting the track for the first time to what it looked like 5 days later. And I sat there going like, this is fantastic, but I could be doing something wrong. And so I then have to go and look at videos or get advice from other people or even try other things on the track. And that really was critical in terms of having that time to explore and try different things, to go and read books. Speed Secrets helped out a lot, you'll be pleased to hear. But basically trying to find out more information of what is it that I can try to actually get better and to go and apply on a track. Now, the problem with that is when we go for a race weekend or we actually go and hit a track in real life, we don't have all that time. So what is it we can do now to condense all that learning down into a much smaller time to actually capture the things that I'm doing well, to put it all together to say, this is what you need to keep doing. You're on the right path here, and you need to reinforce that as much as possible.
So I guess we've hinted and talked around about the Catalyst, and there's obviously listeners who have heard about it and have read about it and maybe seen it, and some maybe already have it and are using it. But for listeners who have not heard about the Garmin Catalyst, can you give us an overview of it?
Sure, I'll give it a go, and hopefully I don't miss anything.
I'll check you out though.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I mean, more than anything, what the Catalyst is a very intuitive device, which at the base level is doing lap times like many other systems. Where it differs significantly, though, is we identified a number of areas which we wanted to make big improvements on, because in the industry, they were things that really hadn't been addressed or solved. So we talk about two new technologies. Commonly, that's really what I should have said, that have been baked into the device, and that is the true optimal lap and the true track positioning. So if I talk a little bit about those, you'll understand why Catalyst is very different to anything else that we've seen to date. So with the true track positioning then, the key to that is, for the first time ever, we're able to give you your position on the track. And what I mean by that is we're able to tell laterally where you are on any point of the track. Now that's significant if you think about it, because everything we do on a racetrack is fundamentally all about the corners, especially on closed circuit road racing. But it's what we have the ability to change in terms of how we get better or how we get faster. It's all very well being able to go fast in a straight line, but unless you can navigate those corners most efficiently, you're not really going to improve. So based on that, then, your lateral position, your track position, is absolutely critical. And that is one of the technologies that we baked into the device. So based on that, then, and based on a lot of other sensors and a lot of other sort of systems within the device, we're able to create for the user and for anyone out there driving with it, for the first time, what we refer to as the true optimal lap. And what that is a lap that the driver has actually driven and can repeat. For the longest time, even in some of the online simulators and other things, there's been this idea about your theoretical best lap. But in reality, as many people know, that theoretical best lap isn't always something that you might be able to achieve, because there are times, as we all know as drivers, that we have to sacrifice something on one corner to make another corner quicker. And it's all about how do we put those sacrifices and compromises together most efficiently to make the lap that we can actually drive from start to finish to give us our true optimal lap. And that really is a fundamental technology which is baked into the device.
Well, when you talk about the true track positioning and how it can sense where the car is, I mean, other data systems using GPS does that as well. Is it more accurate? Is it different? How is that different?
Really good question. So the fundamental problem that we're trying to solve then is in order to use GPS, which is fundamentally what most people in the industry have used to date to give you your track position, it relies on a very accurate GPS receiver. But then you also need to make that with very accurate or highly accurate maps, almost survey grade, if you have a very accurate GPS receiver. In reality, we all know that the systems that are available today to the mass consumer, that just isn't possible. And so we've taken a very different approach. For everything that you've seen in the device and all the screenshots you see out there, there are no maps and there's no cartographic data baked into this device. The only thing that's put into the device is actually a database of start-finish lines. everything else you see in terms of the track recreation, the line through the corners, everything that you see is all created dynamically on the device. And that really then hopefully starts to bridge that gap and help you understand how we're different. So yes, we could go over and overlay just raw GPS data on any mapping data that's available, but we all know that at times you'll see that flying off the track, or it won't be an accurate shape around the corner, or it just won't appear to be the actual line. And so that really is the fundamental difference with the true track positioning, is it's showing you a fully recreated track map that the device has been able to create using the technology and the sensors that we've put in there, to actually give you now the reconstruction of the track as well as the line you drove around that track.
So I have to say that one of the things that has been interesting over the past couple of weeks is how people are, I guess they're used to looking at data in one way. They look at the squiggly lines on the screen typically. And I look at the Garmin Catalyst as a completely new category. And I've used the analogy a bunch of times, so maybe, listeners may have heard me say this before, but, I relate it to, when snowboarding came along. Initially people said, well, it's a different way of skiing. And it's like, no, actually it's a new category. It involves sliding down a snowy mountain, but it's a whole new category. And I look at what the Catalyst is doing is it's created a new category. And, to me, data systems seem to be my experience. And I've been using data for over 25 years now. The first time I started using it was early 90s. And I love data. I love it as a driver. I love it as a coach. But I've had to shift my thinking from, okay, I'm going to, after the session, sit down with a screen, download data, look at squiggly lines, and from that, interpret what I need to do or what my driver that I'm coaching needs to do. And this is sort of, it's switched that whole thing around. It's like, okay, this thing's giving me feedback in real time. I don't have to interpret those lines. I just have to listen to what it says and follow what it tells me to do. And I have to say that I have talked to a few drivers who are struggling getting their mind switched around this whole new way of thinking. Is that an accurate way of looking at it?
It is, and it's very much an anticipated question, because anytime there is a disruption in a market with disruptive technology, it does definitely take a while for people to start to understand what it is that, or how they need to change their perception. So you're absolutely right in terms of data has been very important in this industry for so long, and it will continue to be. But we have created something that's new and different, which is going to take time for people to understand. And really what I mean by that is, first, if we look at the name of the device, so it's the Garmin Catalyst, but it's called the Driving Performance Optimizer.
Yeah.
And it's called that for a reason, because we really are focused around the driving and everything about what the driver is doing. I use data like you, and there is definitely a place for it, and this device won't replace the data system in vehicles. I will still have to use the data systems to go down and download and make sure my oil temperatures are good, my oil pressures are good, the coolant temperature, there's nothing going wrong there, my brake pressures are good. So there's definitely still a place for that. But what this device is that the other systems aren't, is it's looking at your driving. Because fundamentally, when I think about what I do when I go out on track is, yes, I'm worried about the vehicle, but if I've done my work as a mechanic off the track correctly, then that should all be good every time I go out. But then I really should only be focused on driving when I hit the track. And that's, in the moment and what we're there for. So the way that that's kind of done, and the problems that we were trying to solve was, first and foremost, it had to be immediate. And secondly, it had to be easy. And, that you've mentioned a couple of really, good things about it. But what I mean by that is, by immediate, we wanted to get the user immediate feedback as they were driving. And so one of the base parts of the audio coach, which we haven't spoken about already, which I do apologize for, but one of the base parts of the audio coach, which you get out of the box without doing anything, is basically it's two things. It's one is lap times, which are very important because that's what we're all chasing to reduce. But the second one then is actually the positive affirmations after we navigate a corner. And what I mean by that is, as we go through a weekend and we start to get faster and faster and pick up speed and start to relearn the track or reacquaint ourselves with the track or learn a new track, there are going to be times where we take a particular corner faster than we have for the entire rest of that weekend so far. And so the device immediately, based on the true track positioning and the true optimal lap, is able to instantly tell you in an audio headset that what you've just done is a new best and tell you why. So it could be the way that you broke, it could be the way that you turned in, it could be the way you apexed. But immediately after taking that corner, as it's still fresh in your mind and you've just done it, the device basically talks to you and say, you've just done really well on that corner. This is your new best. And, it was basically down to either the apexing, braking or turning. And so that is key and fundamental for being immediate. The other aspect of the being immediate, though, is what happens off track. So off track then, as soon as you step out of the car, it's built an optimal lap, it's built all the information and data behind the scenes, and without having to download it to a laptop or anything like that, you can instantly see on the screen everything from 3 opportunities or up to 3 opportunities to get better, as well as what we call the optimal lap. Now, the optimal lap is presented in a way that it gives you a video, so you can go and watch that, which is really important. I did. You'd be pleased to know I did your training earlier on this year in terms of mental awareness and being in the zone. And when we talk about visualization, this device does that in terms of you can now visualize your optimal lap. So everything the device has pulled out and constructed for you, you can go and watch back time and time again. So those aspects have been absolutely key for us because they add to that immediacy in terms of being able to give user feedback straight away. The other things we've done, though, in terms of trying to make it intuitive, is to help people understand and put in there even some squiggly lines. Because whilst we're trying to say that we've done all the hard work so you don't have to, we're trying to also transition people that want to see those squiggly lines, but also help people understand now in a graphical way what it is about the braking, what it is about the turning that has been good or bad, and the speed they're carrying. But you also might notice what we've also done is improve something even as fundamental as the delta time chart. So I've been looking at time delta charts for a long time, and every time I look, I have to take a pause and work out, okay, which line represents which lap, which one's faster, which one's slower. And if you look at the Garmin Catalyst, we've even focused on that aspect to say, no, there's a way graphically that we can show you through color gradients that should be intuitive to help you understand immediately which one's faster and why. And so using things like color coding and intuitive colors, we've tried to make that really as easy as possible for the user.
Well, I have to say that I believe the way you stitch the video together is something that was certainly on my wish list for years. And I think it is so critically important that that tool is there. So now you can sit down afterwards and go, not just like, some data systems will tell you your theoretical lap, but basically it's a series of boxes with numbers in it that says this segment you did in 13.27 seconds. This one you did in 5.71 seconds. But you're going, what did I do there? Well, this goes back and it shows you. And now you can sit down and watch that video and then close your eyes and imagine yourself doing it. Now watch that video again and then close your eyes and imagine it. Like that is such a valuable tool between sessions. And the other part that I like when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the fact that you still show some squiggly lines. I work with some drivers who they can imitate a squiggly line. So if they see a squiggly line, they can go, oh, I can go make that squiggly line happen. So there's different learning styles. And for some people, it's just that visual video. For some people, it's the audio cues. For some people, it's looking at that line and go, oh, I gotta make that line happen. So I love that part of it. And sorry, but I get a little excited about this. The other part that I love is the confirming feedback. As a coach, I would say one of the things that has made me successful as a coach is I tell people what they're doing right. And we as humans, we react to that. If you tell me I did this right, I'm going to go and do it right again just because I want to hear that that feedback. And I don't care whether it's coming from a coach, my parents, a friend, or a device mounted in the car. I want that. So I think that's cool.
It's funny, actually, you mentioned that. So during the development of the audio coach, one of the things we discussed internally was, hey, we really want to come up with some audio, either noise or phrase or something like that, which the user then hunts for. The user gets excited when they hear. And so I think everyone can relate to either, going back to some of the old games or anything like that, that there'll be a noise and you hear it and you just feel good about it because it was something that was, kind of as you participated in a particular activity was drilled into you as this is good. And so we wanted to bake that in. And so what's been really interesting is we couldn't find a noise in particular that worked well for that. But what we did find was a phrase that now whenever anybody uses it, they go hunting for. And that is the new best. So basically you go around a corner, you've just nailed that corner and you've nailed it and you're waiting for the device to tell you it. And when it does, it's so gratifying to think, yes, yeah, I knew that was good. And this is confirming that immediately. I don't have to wait until I get to the line. And that is just fantastic. That's just really what I need and what I'm basically hunting for now as a user.
Yeah, I love that. And can I go back to something you said in the very beginning about Garmin's approach is, what customers want. But, there's that old saying that apparently Henry Ford said that if he listened to the customers, they would have asked for a faster horse. And, I think Steve Jobs said that about Apple products was, if he just waited for the customer to say what they wanted, you wouldn't get these breakthroughs. And I think you're listening to kind of what the customer wants, but you're kind of going beyond, you're going a little bit beyond what they thought they wanted because they didn't know quite what was possible even. And I don't want to get into the comparison of, with Apple, but, either love Apple or hate Apple, they've changed our lives. And I think, Steve Jobs' thing was always make it simple, push one button and it works. And, I didn't know I wanted a smartphone until there was one. And I was like, oh man, I want a smartphone. So I think it's interesting what you've done in a way in that, you're giving people what they want, but even more than they thought they wanted because they didn't know they wanted what it's capable of doing. I think the more I use the Catalyst, the more I realize this thing can be very simple and I can use it at a very, almost surface level kind of way, or I can dig in almost as deep or as deep as using some of the most high tech data systems in race cars that I work with. So it's got a lot of depth to it as well.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting you bring up the Henry Ford quote because being an innovation group, that is one of the first things that I say to my team as they come on board is I use that example, about if you were to ask people what they wanted, but before the internal combustion engine, everyone would have turned around and said, well, I want a faster horse. I want it to go further distances without, needing water. And really what they needed was the locomotive or a car, but they didn't know it was even possible. And that to me is always spoken about people's wants, which is they want a faster horse, versus the needs, which is fundamentally they needed that car, but they didn't know it was even possible. On that note, though, one thing I do have to kind of talk about, and you mentioned that about Garmin's approach is how we go about this. I alluded to, or at least mentioned, our team there, and I do want to say that it has really been a big team effort. I know we often talk about, and there's often individual names put out there for product development, but this wouldn't be possible without the team that we built to create this, and many of them participate actively in the motorsports market, which again is really, really important because that connection with the customer, the connection with truly understanding what the customer's needs are, and the problems that the customers face is absolutely critical to making a good product. And so that is kind of like I suppose our bread and butter and a part of our culture from a very, very early age that, for us, the product, and the customer are absolutely everything. And having that connection and understanding is extremely important to be able to creating good products.
Well, it's interesting because I think early on when we spoke, I realized pretty darn quickly that you knew what you were talking about and you have a strong motorsport background and you understand it. But there was a side of me that kind of went, Garmin's a big company, what do they really care about this? And one of the times that I came and visited you guys and I met the team, or part of the team at least, a chunk of the team, and, you kind of start talking and going, well, all these people they're really into this. This is not just, something they do Monday to Friday. This is something that they live. So I thought that was really cool. Hey, am I allowed to tell the story about when we were at Heartland Park? I don't know, somewhere about a year ago.
So I think we're probably good to now that we've released the product.
You had me out at Heartland Park for 2 days, and we had the really cool Mustang. I can't remember the model number. What was the Mustang? What's the Mustang FR?
It was a GT350R.
That's it. Yes, which is it surprised me just how good that car was, and I shouldn't say that way in a way, but it was a really super great car. And you basically said, here, use this device and tell us what you would change. And, I don't know. I can't remember all the little things, but, we talked about, can we move the button over here, or can we change the color of that? So there was a bunch of that. And it was cool because I spent 2 days, I can admit it now, I think, I basically thrashed that car for 2 days straight, and had an absolute blast. Kind of went, man, I am wringing the neck of this thing. And then towards the end of the second day, I just went, well, what does the catalyst tell me to do? And we looked at the 3 opportunities and it said, do this, do this, do this. I went out on track and did those 3 things, and it knocked almost a second off my best lap time, 0.9 of a second. And I got out of the car going, I was shocked that it did that. Obviously, super happy that it did it. But there was a moment there I was kind of like, man, I didn't think that there was still that much left in me. Like, I was surprised. But that was kind of the biggest aha for me, because I'd seen, little bits that you dripped out to me, but when I saw that, I was like, this thing is going to change the way we approach our sport. And, there was a moment I was like, oh my God, am I out of a job as a coach? And I was like, no, what I've learned since is this is the most valuable tool that I can use as a coach or as a HPDE instructor, as a HPD organization. This is a tool that I can use, and it's not going to replace me. It's just going to enhance what I can do. And by the way, it's going to save me some time rather than me having to sit down and spend 15 minutes looking at squiggly lines. And that 15 minutes, I can do it in 15 minutes because I've spent 25 years looking at squiggly lines, but I can do it in 15 minutes now. This thing is going to take me 15 seconds. So it just makes my job easier. It's not going to replace it. So.
And that's really interesting, because for us as well, during every product development that we do, there is always a moment where you get a reaction from somebody in the industry, or you get something that happens during testing where you know that what you've got, you're onto a winner and you've done the right thing. And for us, I remember that day well. I actually remember recording you, and I've got an audio snippet of you doing that whilst on track, but I've got an audio snippet of that. But for us, that was the point or the juncture in the project where we thought, yes, we have done what we set out to do, and we're on the right track. Because if we can do that for Ross Bentley, then we can do it for everybody else. It was a fantastic day. We really appreciate JD, and just a shout out to JD here for letting us use his car that day, because that car was set up as a time trials car, and he really enjoyed you driving it because it helped him, at least it helped him understand what the car could do. But I do think we had to replace his tires after that one. So that was, again, really good testing session and fantastic for that.
Yeah, thank
Now,
you,
you also
JD.
mentioned, right. You also mentioned coaching then, and you're absolutely right. So the intent with this device is not to replace the pro coach. This really is then to not only complement any coaching that anybody gets, but also allow people, as we kind of go through this world, to make sure that every time they're out on track, they're getting reinforced what they need to do or what they're doing well. And it really is that focus, because the device, whilst it will give you and stitch together your true optimal lap based on what you've done, it will never tell you to do anything you haven't done. And that's important.
Yeah,
And
really
that's also
important.
where, yeah, absolutely. That's where pro coaches and coaches come into that, because that's the opportunity to improve. But also, if people want to experiment, they can. But again, know that, the device is only recording what you do and stitching that all together to reinforce what you've done well. But also throughout the weekend, then, from like a Friday to a Sunday or a Thursday to a Sunday, that if you did something really well on the Friday morning and can't recreate it, be able to easily get back there, so you can always go back to, no, there was a better way that I took this particular corner, and how do I get there?
Yeah, and I think I have been saying in this whole high performance driver education (HPDE) world that we have to change our thinking in the way we transition drivers, students, kind of as they move up the ranks. They go from novices to intermediates to advanced drivers, and somewhere in there, it's like an on-off switch. We have an instructor in the right seat. We have an instructor in the right seat. We have an instructor in the right seat. And then bingo, one day you're signed off as solo. And yeah, some organizations do a better job of check rides and all that kind of stuff. But eventually that student becomes a solo driver. Now they go out there and they drive around by themselves. And maybe every now and then they ask for an instructor to get back in the car with them. But I believe that there needs to be more of a transition. And this is a device that can help with that transition. I would love to be in a situation where I am working with a student, I'm working with a student. The student has now got to the point where they're safe. Sure, there's things that you can do to be faster and more consistent. And one of the things you haven't talked about, which I'll push you on, is the what it can do to help you show how consistent you are. But I've got a student who is safe but still needs to improve. But I've got other students that need more work, and maybe they're not quite as safe. I want to go and sit in the right seat with that car, or in the passenger seat with that driver. And now I can say, okay, Catalyst, get in the car and give some feedback, confirming feedback and telling the driver, here are the opportunities working. I can sit down beforehand and say, here are the 3 opportunities the Catalyst is saying that you need to work on. I want you to go and work on this one thing. And after the session, we'll review what it says. And by the way, it's going to give you real-time feedback while you're doing it. So now, as a HPDE organization, I think I can service more students, more drivers, more effectively, more efficiently, and provide a better customer experience by using this as a tool to help them transition from on with an instructor, off your solo. And now there's that transition in between. I think it's I think it's a game changer in that area as well.
I hope so. I really think that's awesome, fantastic to hear. And I've had some direct experience with that in terms of, you mentioned about the consistency. So one thing that the watch did prior to the Catalyst, but the Catalyst now does, is it does reinforce consistency. So we have a few metrics in there, from your best variability all the way down to your top 3 variability and your top 5 variability. But what those are is, think of them like a golf handicap. Because what they show is either your back-to-back laps or your top laps. They show how close they were together. I've used this directly with some students when I've been out on HPDE weekends as a coach. And it's really interesting. Once I started focusing on consistency first, I was able to accelerate students more quickly into better habits, better behaviors, and then focus on better techniques and different driving. And one story in particular was I had a good friend of mine that came to a HPDE event for the first time, and he's got a fantastic car. It's a beautiful car. It was a very capable car. It was an Audi R8, but he was coming to HPDE because he'd done a number of other track days, but wanted a little bit more focused coaching. And so, one of the first things we did immediately working on that Saturday was, okay, let's sit down and go through, get you out on track. I'd already, been with him out on track before other weekends, but let's get you out on track and just see how consistent you were. And so from there, we had a benchmark. And the first thing I said was, okay, I want to take that consistency score, which was, I think, maybe 0.5 or 0.6, and jump straight the way down to 0.4. And so what I mean by that is the closer to that number is to zero, the better you're doing, the more consistent you are, the less delta there is between the different laps. And so it's think of it like a percentage score. And so basically it was like 0.5 or 0.6, and I wanted him to get down to 0.4. So the very next session then, he's going out there, and we're no longer worried about going as quickly as we possibly can. We're worried about going consistently because he knows that this is what's going to get him to the next level. And so he did that and came in, and yep, sure enough, he got down to 0.4. Now, throughout the rest of the weekend, then we focused on getting that score down to 0.2. Again, anything that's kind of 0.2 and below, we've had really good feedback on, okay, that's a good point to start introducing new things. And so from that point, he got down to 0.2. And so from there, his learning just accelerated. You'll be pleased to know that he kind of went from, the very capable R8 and has now gone into much more capable but less nannies car, which is a Radical RS3. And he is now one of the fastest guys in our region on that track, and going out there fighting for lap records, and his learning through just starting with that consistent foundation has taken off. And it's just been so exciting to see. Now, that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to, be the fastest out there. They might want to drive to within their capabilities. But for him in particular, that's something that he wanted to do. And he is just leaps and bounds. And I would like to think that it's all down to the way that we approach that training and education.
Well, I think that's a really great point and it's something that I've talked about, or I've kind of tried to stress over the past few years, is in that track day world, HPDE world, it's not all about the lap time. There's a lot of drivers that I talk to that go, I've gotten to a minute 32, I don't want to push more than that because I want to drive my car home at the end of the day. How do I know if I'm improving? How do I know if I'm progressing? And even I'm beginning to lose my motivation to come back here because I've gotten to 132, and I'm not willing to take a bigger risk. Well, I think what it does is it provides another metric that, typically the only metric that we use is lap time. And unless it's being reduced, how do you know if you're improving? Well, this provides another metric that you can, like you said, you go from a 0.6 to a 0.5 to a 0.4 and get down to a 0.2. It's like, wow, I may be turning the exact same lap time, but I'm doing it a lot more consistently, which means I'm probably putting less effort into actually doing it as well. And you make it down to that same lap time and do a 132, and it might come there. And we all love improvement. And if we're not seeing that improvement, we're going to go take up golf or something. I don't know. You just used the golf handicap thing analogy earlier, but we now have this other metric that we can show that we're improving. And it may be that we get down to that minute 32 and our variability is at 0.2, and you go, man, I think I might want to see if I can do a 131 now, because I'm that consistent with doing 32s and that comfortable with it. So I think that part of it, again, super important for somebody who isn't out to set every lap record and go wheel to wheel. And the only metric is I won the race. Well, there's a lot of people that go to tracks on weekends who are not racing wheel to wheel. Another advantage.
Yeah, for sure. And, you're absolutely right there. And I think you hit the nail on the head because, that consistency metric, that consistency score allows you to judge, just how well you are mastering not only the track, but also your own driving with your own car, and gives you that internal gratification of that improvement. But also then, like you mentioned, in terms of you might want to go and maybe look them for a different time or a slightly improved time. The other aspect to it, though, is as you go through that learning process, you can then introduce new skills. So that could be, okay, let's get down to this consistency with what you're working with at the moment. But then if you want to, apply more advanced techniques, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, something like trail breaking, if they're not used to doing that. But if they introduce then more advanced techniques, initially then you go backwards a little bit, but you can then quickly get back up to your consistency, knowing that you've mastered that new skill. Just to kind of add to that a little bit then, one of the reasons why we love that score so much is because for us, again, it helped us understand that we got it right, because when we invite people like yourself or other pro drivers out to the track to do any testing or to give feedback, one of the things we notice straight away is immediately, even if it's the first time they've ever been to a track, their consistency will be very, very good almost out the gate. And that is so exciting and reaffirming to say that metrics or that score does really reaffirm that in terms of how well you're mastering what it is you're doing.
So Adam, we're getting close to sort of wrapping this podcast, because I always try to keep it to that average commute time. Can we go to a rapid fire questions in terms of some of the questions that I've been asked and I've seen posted on social media? I'll just ask a quick question. You give me an answer. So first one is, what about autocross?
So no, right now the device is designed for closed circuit road courses only. So it won't support autocross.
Can I connect it to my car, to my OBD2 and connect it to my car?
Another great question. So no, we are focused around driving performance optimizing, and we don't need the data from the car. And so that's not a focus for us right now. Like I say, other data systems out there kind of cater to that, but we've built in all the sensors we need to give you that feedback immediately in terms of what you're doing with the vehicle itself and how you're driving it.
So do I need a laptop? Do I need to download software? How do I work with that?
Great question. No, you do not. So everything is done on board the device itself. It's a good size screen, which you can view easily, and it's got good visibility and viewing. So you don't need a laptop. It's even got built-in Wi-Fi. So if you want to get local weather, you can connect it to your phone as a hotspot or a local Wi-Fi. And you can do all software updates via a Wi-Fi connection as well for any updates that might come down.
What about tracks? Does it have a database? Do I need to load tracks into it?
So I could tell a fascinating story about this, but I'll try and keep it short. Yeah. So I spent a long time, my goodness, it must have been a couple of weeks of consolidated effort spread out for a long period of time, scouring the world for as many of the road courses that I could find to build into the device. So I hope I captured all of them. I know I've missed some, and I do apologize. But no, it basically, the device has a database in there for every track that we could find. And that basically contains all of the information for the start finish line, because the actual track shape is going to be built automatically via the device, as well as some address information and other information you might need to be able to get to the track.
Actually, so a side tangent on that one is, I'm just curious, how many tracks did you find?
I lost track after 600, but in terms of different configurations, because we tried to capture the different configurations as well, there's probably over 1,000 now, including the different configurations.
But if I show up at a track and it's not in the database, the 600 or 1,000 or whatever it is that you found?
Really good question. So you are able to create your own track, and that's an intuitive click on create, type in a name, go out and drive. And once it's detected that you've driven a number of laps, it will start to give you some lap times immediately and the feedback after the third lap. At least on the initial run, it gives you feedback immediately on consecutive runs. But from there, once you've finished driving, you click end, and there is a screen that pops up that allows you to move the start-finish line to exactly where you want it and to refine that. Because we do a good job at guessing, but as you can imagine, we don't always get it right.
Okay. What about sharing video? Can I download my video? Because I want to post it on Facebook so everybody in the world can see how good I am.
Absolutely. So right now you're able to access the video from the SD card and share that. There's been a number of questions, and I'll preempt maybe a question you might have about overlays. So we do the overlays on the device to help you understand when you're reviewing the data on the device exactly what's happening in terms of speed and where you are on the track. But right now, the videos don't contain that overlay.
Okay. And audio cues. How does that work? And, what if I'm driving a loud car or, how does that work?
Yep. So I'll mention something now which I forgot to earlier, which is I mentioned the base audio coach earlier. And in the base audio coach, you get the positive affirmations and also the lap times. To get coaching per segment, as we refer to it, you need to go into your opportunities and say add to race coach, and that opportunity will be added to the race coach after you reviewed it. But then you can go in there and enable an advanced race coach. Now that's for the more sort of experienced drivers, because it basically allows them, based on their expertise, to understand what the audio coach is saying without necessarily having seen the data, and they're taking on that sort of understanding and responsibility. How they hear it then, which is really what you were referring to, is there's a number of ways. There's a Bluetooth connection, so for a street car that's out for a track day or HPDE that perhaps doesn't have a modified exhaust, they can Bluetooth directly to a car stereo and turn up the stereo, and they'll be able to hear that. They'll also be able to test the audio before they go out. They can do the same with a Bluetooth headset. So again, if the car's not too loud, that works well. For anything that's a dedicated race car, then really what we recommend is using probably either a Bluetooth connection if you have it, or there is a 3.5mm jack on the side of the device to connect into any existing radio systems or Stilo helmets or anything like that you may already have. And a lot of those helmets will either have very good audio in already, or you can get the noise protecting earbuds with the headset contained within them. So again, it isolates and protects your hearing while still allowing you to listen to the audio coach.
I guess I better ask the question, what does this thing cost?
Really good question. So the current MSRP is $999.
$999. Okay. And the final question, this is the most important question of all. Did you really build this for yourself?
Great question. Selfishly, yes. But really quickly, it did turn into how can we really go and help those customers out there in this industry? Because that really is what Garmin is focused around, is helping people enrich their lives. And in this particular embodiment, it's all about motorsports. What do people look for when they go out there? And how can we help serve that customer?
Okay, cool. And so I guess there is one more final. How do people find out more?
Really good question. So Garmin.com. So direct on our website is a very good place to go and find out more. There's been a lot of activity on Facebook, so I'm sure they'll find out some information there. But yeah, Garmin.com is the official site, and we have some videos posted out of everything from the UIs to how the device works to what it's going to show you, and they will be on support.garmin.com. If you just type in Catalyst in the search box or select the product, from there you can go and get a link to a lot of the videos that are out on YouTube.
Okay, and I'm making notes of that. Those links will be in the show notes as well, but Garmin.com and then Catalyst, and you can look for support. And the videos, some of the videos that you produce that are on YouTube are fantastic. So, Adam, thanks for being on the podcast. This has been fun, and obviously people go, well, are you biased? I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of biased, but the reason is I've seen the development of this thing, and like I said, I hate using the term game changer, but it's going to change. And I've talked to some people who are resistant to game changing, and I can only say to them, it'll change your life too. So this thing is really cool. So again, Adam, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Ross, it's been a great pleasure to work with you over the last few years, and really excited to kind of hear your feedback. And yeah, again, thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, well, we'll be back at the track sometime, and maybe JD will let us use his car again.
Sorry, JD. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, thanks. Keep having fun.
Thanks, Ross.
Does your organization need a guest speaker for an event? Does your driving group need a seminar leader? or an instructor, Ross will come to you in person, or he will join you online for a webinar with you and your associates. He's happy to talk about driving, mental imagery, learning, or just telling stories about the racing life. Go to speedsecrets.com/presentations for more information and to contact Ross for a conversation about your event.